van was really where I was living. It was my mobile newsroom.
Over the 3 weeks he spent covering the Oso mudslide out of his aging but reliable VW van,
It helped me to insert myself into the story and stay here.
SeattlePI.com photojournalist Josh Trujillo learned an eye-opening lesson about nature's unpredictability, and most of all, how people respond to disaster.
And it almost helped me to bond with some of the people in the community, because there's that, crazy journalist out there living in his van. People almost felt, that, hey, this guy's dedicated to the story.
The bonding began as soon as Josh arrived in Oso. A local couple gave him access to their properties so he could make his way to the disaster zone. What he saw took him aback.
I was stunned, completely stunned. I know it was probably one of the worst things I've ever seen. It was challenging to bring that to people in an effective way, and I still think that I was not completely successful at showing people how vast and huge this damage was.
As you are out there, you're walking through the debris. I mean, there were homes there. Families lived there. They're the remnants of what they had.
That was one of the hardest things, was, stepping over items, knowing that this was somebody's life that's now shattered and spread about this mud field. I really tried to avoid even stepping on anything that looked like it was a personal item. I felt like I was in a graveyard, and I worked as best as I possibly could to respect that. It felt like sacred ground.
Still vivid for Josh are sights and sounds of the search and rescue crews combing through the mud and debris. And there were the locals from Darrington and Arlington, the family members, their friends, and others compelled to join in the search for those hit by the slide. Among them, Matt Pater, an Iraq War veteran and local youth sports coach.
I'll probably spend about an hour out there with him, I guess. Just kind of watching him work and, making sure that, he wasn't putting himself in too precarious of a situation.
I was in the infantry, so we did a lot of out in the land and digging through stuff, looking for fellow soldiers and stuff like this, and the casualty of war. So I think I have a good odds, ability to help out. So I'm not going to sit at home and do nothing when I can help. Miracles happen every day. There could be somebody with a perfect air pocket and the airflow through there that they're holding on for somebody like me or you guys, anybody to find them. So it's don't give up hope.
Eventually, rescue became recovery.
That was, for me, probably one of the most striking moments.
For Josh Trujillo, that moment came as he encountered a team carrying a body from the slide area.
And it looked like a funeral procession. They all had their heads bowed. They were walking slowly. I had nowhere to go back farther because I was standing up against where it became water and mud. So I stayed where I was, and they walked past me, and I lifted my camera and made a couple of pictures, and my heart was racing, and they continued on. I told one of the men leading the team, I said, "Man, you're doing God's work out here." And I think I chose my words right, because it turned out he was a pastor at one point in his career.
I love architecture. I've had an absolutely blessed career.
In his 30 years as an architect, Rex Holbein has designed million-dollar homes and won numerous awards for his work.
I'm one of those fortunate people that found a work that was their passion.
The passion and skill haven't changed. It's his life that's taken on a new path. into the world of the homeless.
Who are these people? The answer to that is that they are everybody. They are us. I'll bet we can get one on homeless in Seattle.
Through personal experience and social media, Holbein is bringing awareness to the human side of the homeless, who they are and how they got there. And in the process, the public gets a chance to reach out too.
This is not the issue of homelessness. You know, this is about a person, an individual, one human being that is suffering. And what can we do for that one person in service to that person?
Holbein's journey began on an early morning about 4 years ago as he biked to his Fremont office. When he arrived, he saw a man with a blanket over his head sleeping on a cart.
And I got off my bike, I just tapped him on the shoulder and I said, hey, when you get up, if you want to have a cup of tea, you can come into the gray house across the street here where I work, and we can chat.
He showed up about an hour later. He said his name was Chiaka. After a cup of tea, he told Holbein he'd like to share a story from a children's book he was writing.
He reaches into his coat pocket and he pulls out this big wad of about 25 pages of 8.5 by 11 with small print, and I'm just thinking, oh, God, I'm going to be here for an hour and a half listening to this.
Instead of reading the story, Chiaka starts performing it, singing and dancing.
I'm really just taken with it, and about 3/4 of the way through, I start tearing up.
Holbein learns that Chiaka is an artist. The cart he sleeps on carries his art supplies.
He finished and I just said immediately, you know, I have a shed outside, and if you will organize it, you can store your art supplies in there as well, and you won't have to cart them around with you. And then I kind of blurted out what I really wanted to say right at the first, but I was too afraid to, and that was that you can sleep there too, right? And it was a big thing to say, because like hearing myself say it, I instantly realized, you know, I was taking on something maybe bigger than I understood. He went to the shed, he cleaned it all out, and when I left that night, he was standing in the doorway of his new home. I went home, came back the next morning, he came again, knocked at the door, and said, Rex, would you come out here? I want to show you something. He had made this about a 7-foot tall by 3.5, 4 foot wide painting of this lioness goddess woman that was gorgeous. This man was a genius artist. I mean, he had been painting on the streets for 10 years, been homeless that long, and could hardly sell anything, that he was giving it away for $10 and $15 for food and art supplies. So I said to him, you know, how about I start a Facebook site for you? We'll name it Chiaka, and we'll see if we can get a following going, maybe some commissions. Immediately, people started commenting. They started saying, wow, these paintings are incredible. Could I get one? How do you get one? And a woman in Bellevue bought one for $350, and he got 2 more commissions, and things were really just moving along.
But then one morning, a Facebook comment is posted about Chiaka from a young woman in Pittsburgh.
Oh my God, I think I just found our father. And then right then following, comments from his mother and his sisters saying, Chiaka, we love you, please come home, get in touch with us, along with the phone number.
Holbein learns that Chiaka hasn't seen his family in 10 years.
Chiaka explains to me that he left because his mental illnesses, you know, his bipolar, his anger management, his depression, all of that worried him about his daughters, and he couldn't cope with it all, so he left.
The next day, Holbein drove Chiaka to the airport so he could reunite with his family. It was an emotional goodbye. Still, the homeless artist left an indelible influence on his friend, the architect.
And it was on the way home from SeaTac, actually crying in the car, that I decided that I would start another Facebook site called Homeless in Seattle. And I would do that because I realized in that moment what Chiaka had done for me. He had completely exploded, you know, torn apart the negative stereotype against homelessness.
Holbein set out to challenge what we think, know, feel, and fear about the homeless.
There is no sense of, one category that fits homelessness, but also that each person that I've met that is actually living on the street and struggling with homelessness is there for a reason. This kind of mythical thought that they chose or somehow are living this life by their own decision, is completely false.
Through the Homeless in Seattle site, Holbein posted black and white photographs of the homeless with details about their background, their challenges, hopes, and needs. Many of those stories came from conversations at his Fremont office.
Well, I met you. You had a place by the railroad tracks, right, in Magnolia, and you'd made a tent there.
Word spread quickly that it was a place where the homeless could drop in, get some coffee or tea, use the bathroom, hang out, and talk.
When I first met Rex, I was on the bench, and I came from a military background, and I became homeless here. But
every person without exception has had some trauma, some event, something that has knocked them off their path.
I just started getting depressed, having bad dreams and stuff, and just got to where I couldn't, my anxiety level just got so high, and ended up drinking a whole lot. And
you had some jail time?
Yeah, I did
12
or 9 months in county jail.
So that can include war experience with PTSD, mental illness for sure, could be sexual, physical, emotional abuse, loss of a job, loss of a spouse. But some traumatic event took place, and from that, a spiral into homelessness. So I'm just gonna take a couple to.
As Holbein posted photos and stories on the Homeless in Seattle site,
Right, last one here.
he quickly found out, as he did with Chiaka, about the power and reach of social media.
A community formed around the stories and the posts almost immediately. If I said, this is so-and-so, and tell a little bit about them, and by the way, they're sleeping outside under a tree, there would be a person, a few hours later that would say, oh my gosh, could I bring a sleeping bag for him?
People of all ages and backgrounds wanted to help out by providing basic needs.
We're more crisis-oriented. We're not interested in providing something that's ongoing in an enabling manner.
The office became a drop-off site for food, clothes, and other supplies. And as the response grew, so did the Homeless in Seattle page, to more than 13,000 followers in 45 countries. The site made it easy for people to directly respond, to see an immediate impact, and to feel that they were making a difference in someone's life.
Honestly, it's what fueled my desire to keep doing this.
And to encourage the public to just say hello, a saying that's become prominent in Holbein's efforts to encourage people to acknowledge the homeless when they see them on the street.
we may be homeless or low budget or whatever we are at the time, but just to say hi, makes us smile.
Much has changed for Rex Holbein in the 4 years since he met Chiaka, the homeless artist. He realized that as much as he loves being an architect, his heart is with the homeless. So he's put his profession on the back burner, opened an office in the University District, and founded a nonprofit called Facing Homelessness to expand his reach and message.
One of the first things I told my wife when I started this was that, I have to be careful to try to think I'm going to fix anything. You start off doing it for somebody that's suffering on the street, whatever that part is, small or big, and you quickly find out, and I know we all know this, but it's so true, you quickly find out that you're the one that's being enriched by the moment. It's crazy physics. It's something very beautiful. Yeah.